Hi Year 4, it's Mrs. Collins here with this week's science lesson. Are you ready to become a Hooklow scientist? Remember that this term's question is, what do you know about life on Earth? And so far, if you've been following the activities on Purple Mash and on our blog, you will have done some work on food chains. There's a food chain on the screen. What is it showing us? Can you remember what these words mean? Pause the clip and have a think. Press play when you're ready to go through it. Welcome back. Can you remember how these food chains work? This food chain starts with a producer. Can you remember what a producer is? A producer is a living thing that makes its own food. It doesn't eat any other living things. And the plant is the producer in this food chain, and it's eaten by an insect. The insect is something called a herbivore. Can you remember what that means? A herbivore is a living thing that survives by eating plants. The insect is eaten by the mouse. The mouse is an omnivore. Can you remember what an omnivore is? An omnivore is a living thing that survives by eating other animals and plants. And the mouse in this food chain is eaten by the owl. And the owl is a carnivore. Can you remember what a carnivore is? A carnivore is a living thing that survives by eating other animals. So this is a complete food chain. Started with the producer, the plant, and it ended with the consumer, carnivore, the owl. Well done if you remembered how that worked. Let's move on to today's new learning. Today we're going to be learning about something called classification. Can you say that word? Repeat after me. Classification. Classification. What do you think classification means? Can you spot a familiar word within it? And how do you think it might relate to animals? You might have spotted it's got the word class in it. And we all know what a class is because we're in a class at school. A class is a group of children, isn't it? So classification means a system to arrange things into categories or groups, a bit like a class. And it's really useful when we're studying animals because animals can be grouped dependent on certain things about them. And that's what you're going to be learning about today. Now I'd like you to pause the clip, and on our class blog you will see a video clip that you need to watch from BBC Bite Size that will give you an introduction to classification. When you've watched that, come back to this video and press play. See you in a minute. Okay, so I hope you learnt something from that video clip. Let's recap on some of the things that we've learned. Animal groups. Can you read with me? Animals can be divided into groups or classified by looking at the similarities and differences between them. Animals are divided into two main groups. Animals that have a backbone are called vertebrates. Animals that don't have a backbone are called invertebrates. And you can see on the poster on the screen that the animals have been grouped into two halves. So we've got the vertebrates here, the animals with a backbone, such as a bird or a fish or a mammal. And we've got some invertebrates here, creatures that don't have a backbone, creatures like sponges that you'll find at the bottom of the ocean. and worms. Vertebrates and invertebrates are divided into smaller groups. Vertebrates, for example, are divided into fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. I'm sure you've heard those animal groups before when you've done science. There's some pictures on the screen to show you what kind of animals you would find within these animal groups. You can see a picture of a fish there. Type of amphibian, we've got a frog. Type of reptile, there's a crocodile there. We've got a type of bird, the eagle. Type of mammal, kangaroo. Can you think of any other animals that would fit into those groups? Pause the clip to give yourself time to have a little think and press play when you're ready to move on. Okay, let's move on. There are different types, different groups of invertebrates too. They include invertebrates which have soft bodies such as a jellyfish, worms, and mollusks like slugs and squids. There are also groups of invertebrates with hard bodies such as insects, crustaceans, and spiders. So even though some of these creatures might have a hard exterior, they don't have the spine that the vertebrates do. And you can see some pictures here of some examples of invertebrates. So, I've got some animals on the board, and the question's asking us, can you match the animals to the correct group? I'd like to pause the clip, write the headings into your book or on a piece of paper if you're working on paper, and I'd like you to organise these creatures into the right section. Press play when you're ready to go through. Welcome back. Let's have a look at the answers. Could you spot any birds within these creatures? There's a bird called a blue jay. That needs to be in the birds section. There's a bird called a robin. You might be able to spot blue jays and robins in your garden or local community. Are there any fish? We've got the angelfish there and the koi fish. Any reptiles? A turtle is a reptile. Well done if you got that. And a gecko is a reptile. We learnt about the gecko in last week's reading challenge. We learnt about how it camouflages to hide away from the predators. Insects. We've got the beetle and the wasp. Well done if you organised those into those groups. Great work, Year 4. Have a look at the animals on the screen now. We've got some new ones. How could they be classified together? How could you group them? Could you group them based on what they look like? Maybe how many legs they've got? Could you group them based on what type of animal they are? Pause the clip and have a little think. Maybe you could jot down the groups in your book. Press play when you're ready to move on. Welcome back. Have you had a go at grouping these creatures? Well, here's an example of what that might look like. This is what's called a classification key. It's a way of organising these animals into groups. Some of the animals you've just looked at are on here. They've been organised into vertebrates and invertebrates, and then they've been organised even more into warm-blooded and cold-blooded creatures, creatures with jointed legs and creatures without legs. and you can see how they look and how they've all got similarities based on how they've been grouped. For example, the bear, tiger and the whale are all mammals. The ant, the cockroach and the ladybird all have 3 pairs of legs. But the earthworm and the leech don't have any legs, so they're in a separate group. And this is how a classification key works. It's quite a big one. We're going to be working with much smaller ones today, and we'll build our way up as we get more confident. So, in your learning packs, or if you're working from school, on your desk, you may have got a sheet that looks like this, where it's asking you to finish the classification key. There are some questions on the key to help us to organise the animals. So, for example, this one says, has the animal got legs? You've got some pictures of some creatures on your sheet, and you need to divide those animals into yes or no. Some of them have legs, some of them don't. Let's say no, it doesn't have legs. The next question is, has it got a shell? Yes or no. So I'm going to have a look at these creatures and spot any that don't have legs. Oh, I can see here we've got a snail. A snail doesn't have legs, but it does have a shell. So I would draw a picture really neatly of a snail into that box. And then I'd think, is there any animals that don't have legs, that don't have a shell either? And I can spot the worm there. The worm doesn't have legs and it doesn't have a shell. So I'm going to draw my worm in the box that's titled no. See if you can work through the other questions to work out where these creatures belong on the classification key and draw them in neatly onto your sheet. You might have got a sheet that looks like this, which is challenging you to write your own questions to organise the animals on the key. So the first question is, does it belong in water? This one says yes. And the responses to the question you need to write is either a fish or a frog. So what question could you ask to separate the fish and frog? What differences do they have? If you're in blue group, you will have got a sheet that looks like this, where you're sorting your animals out into a carrel diagram. You need to work out if these creatures are pets or if they're wild animals, and if they have legs or they don't have legs. And you will draw the creatures in the correct box. So I can see here we've got a dog. A dog can be a pet, so it would go in the pet section, and it does have legs. So I would draw the dog in that box. When you finish your first activity, I'd like to challenge you to create your own classification key. You can either choose to use the animals that have been put onto the sheet, or you might want to choose your own animals. You need to write the questions to help separate them, thinking about their similarities and differences, and then draw the animals in the boxes underneath. Do you think you can have a go at that? I'm really looking forward to seeing the kit classification keys that you've done. You can work on the sheets that have been provided, and if you need any help, you can email me at our Year 4 email address. Remember to take your time with your drawing, do it nice and neatly. We want to be able to see which creatures fit within each group. Have fun with this, and we'll see you next week for more science. Bye for now.